In Yaroslavl, a 19-year-old girl was charged with a terrorist attack for attempting to set fire to a collection point of aid to the mobilized. According to investigators, she was engaged in espionage for the security service of Ukraine.
We wanted to set fire to this building. They are collecting help for the mobilized. Parcels are sent to Donbass.
Now the girl faces up to 15 years in prison. The resident of the Khanty-Mansiysk Autonomous District has already been sentenced to 12.5 years in prison under the article on treason. True, no one knows how he betrayed the state. The trial was closed. Recently, the number of Russians accused of high treason has reached at least 22. From my point of view, going over to the side of the enemy is such a speculative thing. That is, firstly, who is the enemy? That is, formally we have no war. Formally, there is a special military operation. For the word war, you can be imprisoned in Russia. Then the question is, who is the enemy? The second point is what to consider about this transition, and how to prove it is even more important. Standard of proof in these cases. This is most often correspondence with someone in the messenger. But the circumstances may be different. It's a pretty stretchy thing. Some might be joking. Any joke can be interpreted. The composition of the so-called crimes often does not fall under the article on high treason, human rights activists say. They do not rule out that with such a dynamic of sentences, Moscow may lift the moratorium on the death penalty. An example is nearby. Recently, the Belarusian parliament approved the death penalty for treason against the state for officials and military personnel. They can return. In Russia, law as an institution, like everything else, is subject to the will of one person. The tendency is such that they can return, and most likely one day it will happen, unless this regime is dismantled, one way or another, soon. Apparently, it's waiting for us. When exactly and in what order, I can't answer. The most popular repressive article about fakes does not lose its relevance in Russia either. Indeed, today the main task of the Kremlin authorities is to intimidate citizens so much that they are afraid not only to speak out against the war, but even to think about it. And most importantly, the repressive laws in the Federation are formulated so vaguely that people simply do not understand the so-called red lines, which are dangerous to go beyond. For example, an 18-year-old Moscow resident was arrested for an ordinary interview.
The reason for the persecution of 18-year-old activist Maxim Lipkany was an interview about the war in protest which he gave to Radio Liberty. The young man's apartment was searched, after which he was detained and taken to the investigative department of the Investigative Committee for the Central District. The activist is charged with an article about the spread of fakes about the Russian army based on political hostility. From the message, OVD Info.
And in Lipetsk, a criminal case was opened against activist Stanislav Korvyakov under an article about discrediting the Russian army for posts on social networks, in which he compared the Z sign with a swastika. The journalist Yulia Starostina also discredited the Russian army. The reason for the administrative protocol was her phrase "love and friendship are stronger than war." Reported by Sergei Kulyas, Yulia Hranovska, UATV News.